Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Farmers Insurance Open. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure. But first off, look at the golf course in my modeling for this week, the key stats and comp courses that I'm using to go out there and identify some of my top plays. And then afterwards, we're gonna go through some of my pieces of exposure that I've already gotten to, both from the outright perspective with a few outrights in top 10s and 20s, and also my DFS core plays and value plays that I'll be getting well over the field on this week. So by the end, you'll have a good taste of how to research for this event, as well as a few different pieces of exposure to perhaps keep on the back burner in your own exposure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in. But first off, look at the key stats in modeling around Torrey Pines. Just like last week, we have multiple courses in play, but this time around, it's only 2 courses and a 36-hole cut line. So not quite the 3-hole event, 54-hole cut line like we had at the Amex, but the same kind of dynamic going over the first few days. After the cut line, they'll be back at the South course for rounds 3 and 4, and that track is much more difficult than what we have at the North course. So for the most of our modeling here, we're going to be focusing on that South course side, which is significantly more difficult than what you have at the North course. North course, you'll see -6 to -10 rounds. You're hardly ever going to see that around Torrey Pines South. So over here on the modeling, you're going to see a lot of stats where we're looking for players that can grind it out. So approach is always going to be up there at number 1. Worth noting that it's skewed a little bit longer than what we've had for the first few weeks of the year. A lot more shots coming from 175 plus, but off the tee, it's mostly emphasizing that driving distance. You have a little bit of shots gained off the tee regular in there, but it's driving distance, carry distance, also club head speed that we're looking for around this kind of track. Not only because it's very demanding from the length perspective, but also because the 4-inch ryegrass rough is extremely difficult to extract your ball from. Unless you're going to be closer to the hole and have a shorter club in, that's one way to go ahead and neutralize that kind of effect, but also that club head speed has the double effect of giving you a little bit more power out of that rough, a better ability to hit some of these really firm greens, and depending on the weather, that can be an even bigger advantage on certain years. Bogey avoidance, something we're looking at this difficult kind of golf tournament. I've heard that the temperatures are going to be up for the first few days, so maybe won't play as hard for Thursday and Friday, but that'll be especially valuable when we get to the weekend and temperatures go down a little bit. Your par 5 scoring, always an important aspect of playing at the South course, and while there's not a lot of opportunities on your par 4s and 3s, your par 5s, even though they aren't all reachable, are where a majority of your birdie production is going to come from. So not only just out there for DFS and outrights, but for the fantasy scoring perspective, it's going to have a really big deal with your model this week. Putting is de-emphasized around this kind of event. You have 2 different grass types this week. You do have bent grass over there at the North course, but the South course has regular old POA greens. So it's kind of hard to focus on one real grass type this week, but if you take a look at some of the past champions at this event, they're not always the world's best putters. Luke List really comes to mind there, and even Pavon last year isn't world class in that category. Around the greens, important at these difficult sort of golf courses, looking at the last 24 rounds around the green, as well as some heavy rough stats. And for our comp courses, I'm looking at some US Open and PGA Championship success, as it's going to play difficult from the difficulty perspective, at least similar out there from that kind of angle. And then the actual 2 comp courses I was looking at was Quail Hollow, home of the Wells Fargo, that'll be the truest this year, and then the Memorial Tournament in Muirfield Village Golf Club, which are among the hardest regular PGA Tour events that we have, and also very demanding from that length perspective as well. But what you can see with these players is we want guys that could win at something that 10 to 15 under, so not quite what we had at the Amex, where you have 25 to 30 under par winning, not even quite like we had at the Sony or even the Century, where it was much more about a well-balanced kind of skill set. This week, there is a very specific type of player that gets a huge advantage. It's players that are long off the tee, good with their long irons, and if there's anything else to look at, it's that par 5 scoring and bogey avoidance. Those are your main key stats out there for this kind of week. The putting, the around the green, those short game players that are sometimes a little bit shorter off the tee are not going to fit this golf course nearly as well as some other people. And while you have some exceptions, I mean, Rance Snedeker's won around Torrey Pines before. You had Peter Malnati, he's made a bunch of cuts around this track. You have much more players, or a vast majority of them, that are long off the tee that are getting the job done. So that's where a lot of our emphasis is going to be. Of course, guys, a lot of these stats came from the Bet the Number model this week. And if you're looking to see my exact model weightings, make sure to check them out over there on my Patreon page. And you can use a lot of those weightings over there on Bet the Number site to go out there and make your model for this week. So if you want to see how every single player grades out, you want to have the ability to go out there and fine tune it for exactly what you're looking for, well, make sure to join Bet the Number remember, use code Gsluke when you guys are signing up. It'll give you a discount off any membership, also a free 7-day trial if you guys want to see what's going on just for this week. And if you go on there, you can take my weightings from over there on my Patreon page and then adjust them to your own liking over there. So obviously giving you guys a little stat breakdown of what to expect for this week, but now let's use that, go out there and find some pieces of exposure, whether it's for DFS or from the outright betting perspective. First up, we've got our main outright for this week, and we're going to try and make it 2 weeks back to back where we've got the outright winner. And really, you've got no other better chance to build on top of Sepp Straka at 61 last week than at what is my favorite event of the entire year. It's not my favorite because it has the best course or the best field. They're both very respectable. I like Torrey Pines. I like the field strength here. It's that I've hit the most outrights of any event in my entire career around Torrey Pines. I hit Luke listed 150 to 1. I had Max Homa for the biggest outright bet of my life a few years ago, and it wasn't like he was out there at like 300 to 1. I just put a whole bunch of money behind Max Homa to win because he was my single bullet out there for the farmers. So a lot of good vibes that we've got around here. So Ludvig Aberg, you've got a whole lot to live up to if you're going to go out there and cash this out like Sepp did. But let's talk about it. So Ludvig Aberg fits this golf course to a T. We want players that have a high ball flight into the greens. He is maybe the highest ball flight player that we have in this field. He's an extremely long off the tee player with all the carry distance that we could hope for around a Torrey Pines. And if you take a look at his first year performance, he top 10'd around this track. So last year maybe didn't even have his best stuff. He hadn't gone out there and established himself as a real tour stud yet, other than that win at the RSM Classic in the fall before that. So, he came in here without any sort of experience and went out there and gave us that top 10 finish. Heading into this event, he's playing even better golf than what we had then, gaining nearly 0.7 strokes per round off the tee. And though his only negative category was over there on approach, if we zoom in a little bit, you see that go back into the positive. In fact, if you take a look at his 2024 performance as a whole, it's a whole lot of green out there in the shots gained approach category. In fact, if you look at it for the entire season, he's gaining over 0.75 shots gained approach per round if you take a look at last year. So one of the more impressive ball strikers that we have on the PGA Tour. And as I previously mentioned, this is a ball striker's paradise. This is where you go out there, you really beat the field and you're off the tee on approach play. And the putting on POA has also been a bright spot out there for Ludvig Aberg. Now, the putting has been pretty good for him lately. You can see he's gaining about a 0.1 strokes per round in that category. But over his career, POA is the second best surface of any of them around the tour. So I like his chances here at $10,800. He was only 10 to 1, so I'm only going to be taking a few outright bets for this week. It's a top-heavy card for me at a ball strikers fest like this, but we're going to have a lot of top 10s and 20s to take towards the bottom end of the board. So 10 to 1 is usually not the kind of number that I'm looking for at a regular PGA Tour event like this, especially when it's a full field event. But there are a few golf courses around the tour. Memorial is that same kind of way. You usually see a top-level guy go out there and win. This is one of the few weeks where I think a 10 to 1 investment makes a little bit of sense. In terms of DFS, I think that he'll get some ownership this week. You don't have a whole bunch of guys up there in the 10K range, so pretty much everyone's going to get some steam. But I would say that Hideki Matsuyama has a chance to be just as popular, if not slightly more popular than an Aberg, because of some of that recent form. You can see he's number 4 in the field in terms of recent form ranking, as opposed to Aberg there at just number 19. And if there's one thing I know about people in their ownership and who they like to play out there in their lineups, is they love to tail somebody that's been playing well recently. So hopefully that keeps a little bit of exposure off of Aberg, because if we're getting him at 20 to maybe 22% ownership, then I'm going to be thrilled to take him in 40% of my lineups and get all of that leverage that I need in GPP. So whether it's over here as a core play in my lineups, I think that he'll make quite a bit of sense this week. I don't see him being donkey chalk up there towards the top end of the board, or over there from the outright betting perspective. I think he's just got a good chance to go out there and get the job done. So I think that the North course is going to be massive for Aberg. I think that he's got a real leg up on the field in the other 3 rounds on the South course. But if he goes out there in the North course and could shoot something like -7, -8, go and give us that spike round that we're hoping for, well, I think he's got a good chance to go ahead and take home that trophy. So he's one of my highest projected plays on the entire slate, over an 80% projected made cut rate. Really just checks every single box that we're looking for in a player. Next up, we got Sahith Theegala down here at 30 to 1. He is the only other outright bet that I've taken for this week. So as I said, a little bit top heavy for now. By the time we get to lock on Wednesday, there's a good chance I end up adding at least 1, maybe 2 players to the fold. But at $9,100, I also don't think he's going to carry that much ownership. In the the main reason for that would be the sketchy form over the last 2 starts. So back here in 2025, his first 2 starts at the Century and Sony, he went T36, which was in like a 60 player field, so that was well below average. And then the T37 at the Sony Open also leaves a lot to be desired for a top level player. But what you're getting with Sahith is another perfect course fit. He can be a little bit wild off the tee, but is one of the longest players that we have in this entire field, and particularly when it comes to the carry distance, because he has a lot of spin off the tee, he tends to hit those real big wipe fades, which end up carrying a long way. But the unfortunate aspect is that it doesn't get that much rollout. That doesn't matter around this kind of a track. You have a golf course that has next to no rollout because of the tight fairways and that 4-inch ryegrass rough that you have around Torrey Pines. So if he's going to be missing fairways, which a vast majority of the field is going to be doing, by the way, with only about a 53% fairway percentage, Sahith Theegala is at a massive, massive advantage. And the thing about Torrey Pines is that if you miss like 15, 20 yards offline, you're not going to be in that much trouble. It's pretty much wide open. It's a municipal golf course. It's not meant to go out there and be overly challenging. And the only reason it plays over par for this tour event is because they grow out the rough to 4 inches, because they give them unfair pin locations pretty much. Over there with the setup is the only reason that you see it play really as tricky as it does. So off the tee, I think it's the perfect course fit for a Theegala. He also has that extremely high ball flight, which is very useful around this kind of golf course. And you can see on POA, he is amazing putting, and he gains about 0.7 strokes per round. And if you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds for Sahith, you'll see what the Achilles heel has been. You can see the ball striking has been just like okay, but he's into the negative out there with the putter. And if we zoom out even more, give him a larger sample size, the putter is even more into the negative. So now that we're getting him on a surface that has been extremely favorable for him over his career, I think it could lead to a whole lot of positives. So a Sahith Theegala at 30-1, I know he has a lot more win equity than 3 to 4% like they're implying. In the course history, though he doesn't have a ton of success around here, T64 last year just made the cut, wasn't what we hoped for. He does have a top 5 finish out there 2 years ago, so he's shown us an ability to get it done around this kind of golf course. And now at this stage of his career, I think he's a much more well-rounded player, which is what we need for somebody to go out there and win a big-time event on a big-time golf course like you have here with Torrey Pines. And a few years ago, I would have no business betting Sahith at this sort of number, but he's grown immensely as a player. He's, shown us an ability in contention to go out there and get the job done, and now he's got the skill set a little bit more well-rounded as well. So I love him there at 9,100. Worth noting from the ownership perspective that Will Zalatoris is going to be chalked this week. Now, I thought about betting him outright this week. He makes sense at this sort of track. He plays well at hard golf courses, but if he's going to be 25 to 30% owned, I think more reasonably it'd be like 20-25% owned here in the 9K range, then I'm going to avoid him, because guys like Jason Day are really good at hard courses. Sahith Theegala has been pretty good when you have to go out there and grind it out. Shane Lowry is maybe the best hard course player that we have in anyone in this field. So, I have some love for Willie Z. He's one of my favorite players to watch, but from the DFS angle, you're much better off taking somebody like Sahith if you need to go out there and get different to the field, because I just don't think you're going to get it done with Will Zalatoris. I mean, even Jason Day off the top 3 finish might get some steam over there this week. Sahith, I put in that same sort of category when it comes to the win equity, but I don't think he's going to get nearly as much attention. So that's kind of the idea with going out there and playing him, and also why I took him for an outright bet at 30-1. Next up, we got Aaron Rai, who's not an outright, but was somebody I took for a top 10 at plus 475. And if you're looking for a grinder, you're going to get that with Aaron Rai. Now, he doesn't have a lot of event history or a lot of course history to go off of. Did have a T6 finish in his first start here, though. So last 2 years, not what we're hoping for from an 8K player, but has shown us an ability to get to that optimal lineup at least. But the recent form is why he's going to be low owned. Essentially hasn't played, did play over there at the Century, ended up with a top 15 finish, which Aaron Rai, not known as a really good birdie maker. He's not usually somebody you play at an event with a winning score of like 30 under par, but he managed to go out there in top 15 in a top level field, which I would say is a huge positive given his course fit there. This week, though, you're getting the perfect course fit. You want somebody that can go out there and just grind out pars. Aaron Rai is your guy. And kind of like in Ludvig Aberg, I think a lot of this is going to come down to his North Course round, because at the South South course, I have no issues with Aaron Rai. He's the perfect course. You play him in major championship sort of conditions. You play him at events when you don't have to get to 30 under par. Heck, you don't even have to get to 10 under par to top 10 here sometimes. Over here at the Farmers Insurance Open, all of that is exactly what we're hoping for with Aaron Rai. And we're not going to have a whole lot of stats to work with because he hasn't played all that much. But if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, he's gaining in all three categories from tee to green and is a slight negative over there with the putter. And if I said there's one thing you can get away with around this golf course, it's not having the best flat stick. You've had guys go out there and win that are some of the worst putters on the PGA Tour, and your top 3, top 5 finishers have just been team no putt over the years. Luke List maybe being the best example of that, but for the top 10 at plus 475, I thought that was rather disrespectful for a player like Aaron Rai, who makes a living with all the top 10 finishes that he posts. So I think if it gets more difficult this weekend, I heard the first few days that it's going to be warmer, maybe a little bit easier when it comes to the scoring averages, but if it gets tough, maybe a little bit windy over there on Saturday, Sunday, I think that would only be even more beneficial for somebody like an Aaron Rai. So $8,300, I think he's going to go a little bit under the radar because we haven't seen him play nearly as much as some of the other guys in the 8K range. Ben Griffin's on absolute fire. Harry Hall is a top 6 recent form ranking, so I think those kind of guys are going to get some attention. And then even guys like a Kitayama, a Max Homa, it just feels like they're going to get a little bit more hype on a week like this, and I think that's a little bit of a mistake given how good Aaron Rai has been at these kind of golf tournaments. So love him there at 8,300. I think he'll be a little bit lower owned than he should be. Kind of like a Sahith Theegala. I don't think he's going to be like a pure pivot play or sub 10%, but something in that 10 to 12% range on an Aaron Rai would be very reasonable. And if I'm taking him in 25 to 30% of my lineups and I'm getting over that 2x leverage, then I'm going to be thrilled to go out there and use him in a few builds. So another example of a core play that I'm taking towards the top end of the board and I'm getting well over the field on and going for a little bit of betting exposure as well. We still have some value plays to go through, so stay tuned for the rest of the video, but do want to remind you guys how you can get access to all of these spreadsheets. All my projections, modeling, everything that you see here in these videos can be found over there on my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of this video to go out there and check it out. And for $15 a month from the DFS tier, you can get access to all of these for every single event. It has every single player covered, so not just the 6 players or so that we talk up here in these videos, but all 156 that'll be teeing it up this week at the Farmers. You're going to get a full statistical breakdown on them. Whether it's my modeling, recent form rankings, you can see their shots gained metrics, recent form, you name it. Everything that you see here is yours for every single player. And it's not just for the main slate for every single week, but I also do this for round 2 through 4 showdown. So make sure to check out the Patreon page if you guys haven't already gone and joined. A great way to get all of my takes on every single player. And it's really going to speed up your research process. It puts all the information that you need in one really concise way to go out there, and rather than having to go from site to site, website to website, trying to figure out, the pieces of research that you need, it is literally all going to be on one spreadsheet for you. So make sure to check it out. Link in the description of the video. And now let's talk through some value plays over here for this week. So first up, we got Patrick Fishburn, who is only $7,500. I took him for a top 20 bet at plus 300. And if you saw my course breakdown that I posted a little bit earlier today, I'll put a link in the description of the video to that as well if you guys want to see my full take on the Torrey Pines courses this week. But Patrick Fishburn was showing up in almost every single category. He's very long off the tee, one of the longest players in the field. He was #1 in green regulation percentage last year, which is usually, and if you take a look at that list, the guys at the top of the GIR list are almost always grinders, guys that play well at courses with a winning score closer to like 10 under as opposed to 30 under. He's a good around the green player of the sort of courses that we're using for comparison. And then on POA, he's also a gainer on these greens. So he's the kind of play that if you're running any sort of statistical modeling this week, and it is even remotely accurate for the golf course that we're playing, it's going to put you onto somebody like Fishburn. So I said during my course breakdown that I'm gonna have to get some exposure there because I don't think he's gonna be overly popular in DFS. If we take a look at some of the players around him, like an Eric Cole, I can almost guarantee you will probably be higher owned. Charlie Hoffman's gaining over a stroke approach per round. Like, I think he's even gonna get some play this week.
week. Nicholas Norgard-Moller, he's a absolute bomber from the DP World Tour. If he's low owned, I mean, I'll play him, but I feel like even somebody like Moller might get more attention than somebody like Fishburn this week, which I think is just a mistake. He's been playing solid golf. He's number 40 in the field when it comes to recent form ranking. And if you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, which really gives us an idea of how he's playing coming in, I mean, he's gaining across all 4 stat categories, just solid across the board, no real weakness heading into this event. And the event history is pretty much non-existent. He did miss the cut here last year in his one ever start, but hopefully that keeps the ownership lower than it should be. So I'm not going to go out there and bet somebody like Fishburn to win and his, first ever made cut at this event. But a top 20 at plus 300 makes a lot of sense for somebody that's playing a lot better golf than people would realize. So I'm going to take him there at 7,500. We take a look at the recent form as well. I mean, he's been posting a lot of sneaky results recently. Maybe not so much with the missed cut at the Amex, but top 6, top 8 finish, T12 there 3 starts ago is exactly what you're hoping for from this sort of player. Next up, we got ourselves Thriston Lawrence, and guys, this is my favorite play of the week. This isn't the play that I think is going to win. Thriston Lawrence is one of my favorite players in the world, period. And what I like about him is his play style. He absolutely sends it off the tee. He's one of the longest players that we have. He's a really good putter, and he's one of the best short game players that we have. So how Thriston Lawrence plays well in the events where you see him playing well is when missing off the tee doesn't matter. And that is exactly what we get at Torrey Pines. So not only are we getting a mix of somebody that I'm going to be over the field on in almost every event that he plays, just because I'm a big fan of his, but this is quite literally the perfect golf course setup for him. He's an extremely talented short game player. We saw him get into contention at the Open Championship last year, which, oh, by the way, a very difficult golf course that they were playing over there that Xander ended up winning. He's got the stones. He's got the stones to go out there in top 20 for sure. But this is the kind of guy, if he ever gets into contention on the PGA Tour, watch out, because he could go out there and actually win the damn thing. He's got the mental fortitude to go out there and get it done. And on the DP World Tour last year, when this guy got into contention, he either won or finished top 3 almost every single time. He's the kind of guy that when he has it going, usually goes out there and doesn't just make cuts, goes out there and finishes top 5, top 10, which is why I love playing him so much over there on the DP World Tour, because that wide range of outcomes is exactly what we're looking for in a GPP play. We want guys that can go out there and actually finish top 5 and get to the optimal lineup, and that's what you're getting here at $7,200. A long bomber who fits the golf course to a tee off the tee. He's got the kind of short game that I'm hoping for, and no one's going to use him. He's brand new. It's his first time playing on the PGA Tour this year, right? Other than the people listening to this or people that really follow the DP World Tour, no one's going to click on a Thriston Lawrence. So I think I'll probably be like 3 to 5% owned, maybe at the very most, hopefully even lower owned than that out there in contests. But for this top 20 at plus 400, I think it made plenty of sense given the skill set this week. He's got the perfect kind of skill set to go out there and take on a long course like this, especially when there's not a whole lot of water to run into off the tee. And now lastly, the last play that we're going to go through is going to be a value play down here with Matty Schmid. He's $6,700, and I took him for a top 20 at plus 700. And you can see over here on the far right, the real reason we're taking him is because he's a long-term top 10 course fit ranking around this kind of track. He likes POA. You can see the shots gained POA is over there into the positive. But if we go to the last 24 measured rounds, this guy is playing a lot better golf than you would probably realize. So you can see down here gaining about 0.87 strokes per round off the tee, one of the longest players that we have in this field. He also hits quite a few fairways, which it might be tough to do this week with a 53% fairway rate, but nice to go out there and hit it a long way. Gaining on approach, though, and then gaining with the putter. And the advanced metrics are really what boost him up in the course rankings, because he already has a solid shots gained profile, right? Gaining across all 4 stat categories, but he's long off the tee, he's good on POA, and he's a really good par 5 scorer. In fact, if you take a look at the eagle rate last year, he had the highest eagle rate of any player on the PGA Tour, and just absolutely dismantled the par 5s. And the reason for that is his prolific length. He can go out there, reach almost every single par 5. He's got an extremely high ball flight, and though he's never made the cut around here before, right? That's why his top 20 is plus 700. That's why he's $6,700. Probably going to be sub 5% owned out there in GPPs, but he's a high upside, very wide range of outcomes sort of play that if he goes out there and hits, could go out there and make himself into the optimal lineup. So kind of like a Thriston Lawrence, you're not looking for safety in these plays down low. Like, I'm not looking for cut makers at this sort of event. I want out guys that fit the golf course, that are bombers off the tee, that when they actually have their best stuff on approach, have a chance to finish top 5, top 10. And that's exactly what you're getting with the Matty Schmid. Take a look at his performances from last year. Not the most consistent player that you had on the PGA Tour. Has gotten more consistent over the last year. I think that's just because he's getting better. He's just improving as a player. But what you see is a lot of spike performances. Those top 10s, top 20s like we're hoping for. And at plus 700 out there for a spike performance, I thought it was well worth investing into. So if he's going to be sub 5% out there in GPPs, I will be thrilled to get well over the field on him, on a player that fits the golf course. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Go ahead, smash that like button if you haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. And also go ahead and comment down below who you've got as the winner for this golf tournament for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. It'll be first come, first serve, so go ahead, get your guests in before anyone else steals them. And they have to be at least 25 to 1 to go out there and win for a chance to earn that month of the Patreon page. So no bear counts. A few of those other guys that are sub 25 to 1, you can't use out here for this contest, but go ahead, claim your player down below before anyone else steals them, and best of luck with all of your exposure this week. Because we have the early lock, our live stream will be Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to stop on there with any questions that you have and I'll get them answered for you. But go through a weather report, all the DFS ownership out there before lock, all that last second info that you need to go out there and crush your exposure. Last week with SEP, it was nice to hit that at 60 to 1. Let's try and add on top of that with our betting card for this week and with any of our GPP exposure as well. I gave it a good go in the $5 GPP, had a couple top 10 lineups. Unfortunately, couldn't take home the 25K to first that I was hoping for, but we're getting close and the process is feeling dialed in. So let's go out there, improve on that performance, and have ourselves a week, guys.